In this short video, we are going to cover two main areas, and that is globalization and global trends. So, what is globalization? Globalization is a trend towards greater economic, cultural, political, and technological independence among national institutions and economies. This term sometimes refers to the elimination of barriers to international movement of goods, services, capital, technology, and people that influence the integration of world economies. And so globalization is characterized by denationalization and is different from internationalization. And we've seen worldwide the use of technology being used between different countries, which is bringing people together. Even when we go to the airports today and we see with the fingerprinting and the eye scanning and the movement, as the same technology is being used from one airport to another across Europe and in the US and worldwide. So this technological change are helping to eliminate barriers and to help facilitate better movement of goods, services and people. So when we think about globalization of markets, the convergence of buyer preferences in markets around the world, globalization of production, dispersal of production activities worldwide to minimize the costs or maximize quality. When we think about Apple as an example, Apple sees the whole world as one market with one people with the same needs in terms of their mobile phones and the functions and the features that they have and the branding that they have for their product and their product quality. So Apple themselves sees, the whole world as one marketplace. When we think about the globalization of markets, the benefits includes, reducing marketing costs, creates new market opportunities, levels uneven income streams, local buyers needs, global sustainability. And if we think about IKEA themselves have over 458 IKEA stores worldwide, and only 20 stores are in Sweden. So we can see that over 90% of their stores are in other countries apart from Sweden, which really creates new market opportunities to sell their complete product range. And when they do sell their product range, the product ranges, in Sweden may be smaller to the product range which is offered to the rest of the world. So when we think about globalization, globalization benefits includes access to lower cost workers, access to technical expertise, access to production inputs, and even again, if we think about low cost workers, well, Apple are based in China. Their manufacturing and production sites are in China, and Apple sells their new iPhone 4s for approximately £1,000 plus. But the actual cost of making an Apple iPhone is only £20 to £30. So we can see the kind of like the cost advantages in working in global markets like China that has lower cost workers. Even if we think about BMW and Brilliance working together, BMW went into along with a joint partnership with Brilliance to enter into the Chinese marketplace, took a 50% stake, and then later on in 2017 2018 they upgraded their market stake in the company to 75%, having a majority stake once the laws in China had changed. And this has allowed them access to new production inputs. Likewise, in terms of Brilliance learning, in terms of the automotive market, they have learned new technical expertise in terms of their joint venture with BMW in terms of how they do things, and so it's a win-win for both companies. So we can see the benefits and companies that are capitalizing on these. When we think about the falling barriers to trade and investment, We think about GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. In terms of the WTO, World Trade Organization, and others, international organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, regional trade agreements, and trade and national input. So we can see that falling barriers are helping to, move trade and investment from one place to another, facilitating globalization. If we think about technological innovation, it's been immense. um, when we when I used to work for a company, Metro Products, and we used to deal with the Far East in terms of importing goods and products, in terms of the stop lock that we sold into Halfords, B&Q's in Texas. Well, we only had a fax machine and a telephone to communicate uh, with our manufacturers and suppliers. And now you have, emails, you have video conferencing, you have the internet, where we never had these things back in the 1990s. So we can see how businesses change. Even if you look and you see this 3D printer, a 3D printer, before, to get a sample of a product item, before we can show it to, the potential buyers and customers to get feedback, it would take, 6 to 8 weeks to get these samples. By the time you've given the designs and they've made the designs and sent it back, it could take a long time. Where now you could do a 3D CAD, and then you could put that into the 3D design printer, and it would print it out for you literally within a few days. So we can see how technology is increasing the pace of development and new product development, and helping to shorten the pace and the way things are done. If we look at, forces driving globalization, we can look at the various countries, and here we can see measuring globalization: Netherlands ranked as number one, Ireland, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, United Kingdom, France, and Hungary. If we look at a snapshot of the world, you know, global growth is projected to reach 3.9% in 2018-2019. Growth projections have been revised down for the Euro area, Japan, Argentina, Brazil, India, United Kingdom, reflecting negative surplus in activity in 2018. Venezuela is experiencing dramatic collapse in activity as a result of humanitarian crisis. Global oil prices have increased 16% from 2018 to early June 2018, and UK economy shrunk by 0.2% in July 2019. But adding to that, now we have got the Ukraine war with Russia. We have got energy prices in terms of oil and gas that has shot up in terms of the wholesale prices, which is then passed on down to the supply chain, to the end consumer, doubling, tripling energy prices, so which has attributed and contributed to the UK inflation rates about over 10%, and worldwide inflation rates well above what people can actually afford. So from a global perspective, at the moment, it's not looking too good in terms of what's happening. But there are contributing factors as regards to the reasons behind all of these. Some issues to debate would include, jobs and wages. The against globalization includes eliminates jobs in developed nations. Lower wages in developed nations exploits the workers in developing nations. We see and we saw with Dyson. Dyson had his operations based in the UK, and then after Brexit, he decided to move his own operations out to another country for um, cheaper and lower wages to help maintain his profit margins. And we think some of the reasons for globalization includes increased wealth and efficiency in all nations, you know, greater labor and market flexibility, and advances in economies of developing nations. And even a research done by the PMC shows, of 136 different countries, shows increase in wealth and efficiency in all nations, but also the greater market flexibility in the developing nations. And what about the income inequality? Inequality within nations, the wage gap between white collar, blue collar, occupants of rich nations, inequality between nations, widening the gap in average incomes between the rich and poor, and global inequality, widening income inequality between all people of the world. The other debating issues includes cultural sovereignty, and the environment. Some of the advantages being allows us to profit from our different circumstances and skills. Disadvantages homogeneous our world and destroys our rich diversity of cultures. Disadvantages, menace of democracy, empowers subnational institutions at the expense of national governments. Advantages, guardian of democracy, globalization spreads democracy worldwide. Some of the global trends, if we look at these, we can see that the global economy overall has grown in 2019 to 3.9%, and the advanced economies are not growing, and if anything decreasing, whereas the emerging markets and developing economies have been growing from 4.7% 2017 to 5.1% in 2019. We can see the rise of the internet and the world population in terms of growing in 2020 to 7.6 billion, and the connected devices from 500 million connected devices to 50 billion connected devices in 2020. So we can see the speed and the connectivity and the communication of all these different apps and software, which is linking the world together. Likewise, we can see in 2009 in terms of the G7 and the E7, the G7 being US, Japan, Germany, UK, France, Italy, and Canada, and the E7 China, India, Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, Mexico, and Turkey. And we can see that in 2009 the the G7 was 29 trillion, whereas the E7 was 20 trillion. And the expectations in 2050 is that the G7 is expected to go to 69.3 trillion, whereas the E7 is expected to go to 138.2, far exceeding far exceeding the G7. So we can see that the real business and the real growth is going to be with the E7. And if we look finally at the global business framework, we can see the global business framework includes which is what we talked about in the other videos, the governance, the policy and the regulation, the environment and social responsibility. And then number 2 being the vision, the strategy and the planning, the finance and performance management, partnership and alliances. Number 3, marketing and market management, product and brand management, customer relationship management. Number 4, operational effectiveness, cost efficiency, technological, integration. Number 5, innovation capacity, responsiveness and process integration. And number 6 being the human resource process, leadership development and cultural development. So we've looked at the 2 main areas in terms of globalization and global trends. So I hope that has added a lot more information to your knowledge base.